One reason I attended so much to television in my career was because it changed my life. I'm convinced that watching shows like The Defenders, which was week after week treating social justice issues, awakened a consciousness in me about the situation in which I lived. The other example I use is watching Matt Dillon defend the Chinese laundryman from being lynched and thinking, that's everywhere around me, even to the point of lynching. And so I broke with some friends, not many. I kept most of this from my parents for quite some time. But it was clear, and so in that way I think television was crucial not only for my development but for the development of the society and the culture. We tend to disparage 50s and 60s television and say it's not, the real, well, first of all, we talk about the golden age, the live television dramas, and those played a major part because that's where I saw those camera movements on the live things, and I was wondering, and of course later when I realized what those huge dinosaur-like cameras moving with huge cables and moving around a studio, what that must have taken. But the Chayefsky and the Rose and those kinds of things, the Serling pieces that I watched were certainly instrumental in this same consciousness-raising process. But series television, primetime television, had a lot of stuff in it that people forget about. Some of my students have written about those shows and I think have done really good work on that period. But that period during college was important for other reasons because it was the television consciousness that had come up. And of course, this is 1963. The civil rights movement was in full churn at that point. Even before that, I remember being at my parents' home, and I believe this was before I graduated from high school, maybe my senior year, and the Freedom Riders had come through Jackson and had done a sit-in at a Woolworth's counter and been beaten up and reviled. And my parents obviously knew enough of my feelings at that point. They said, you don't get involved with anything like this. And they said, did you see about that? I said, yes. And they said, this was over nearby. And being the kind of somewhat arrogant, very arrogant young person I was at that point, I said, yes, and I'm sure it was a bunch of good Christian people who beat them up. That did not go down very well. It was symptomatic of a kind of tension about that. But I keep going back to those things because I think television was so crucial in what happened for me. And many years later, I was at a meeting and in a late night conversation in a hotel room with a bunch of people and recounting that kind of story. And great television scholar, sociologist, political activist Todd Gitlin said, well, if that's what television did, why didn't everybody in Mississippi turn out like you? And I didn't have a terrific answer, but it was because other people didn't have the same sensibilities, weren't listening to the same kinds of things in church and trying to make them work outside of church. And so it was a crucial time because the next year, in my senior year, and Sarah was teaching high school, a professor at the college kind of began to walk beside me as I crossed the campus. I've written about this too. And said, some of us know your views, and if you would like to meet some students at Tougaloo College, which is the historically black college on the other side of Jackson, you can go over this Wednesday night and meet at the chaplain's house. They're planning some things. And so we did. Sarah had to go to a PTA meeting before that, and we were dressed up in suit and tie, and she had on a teacher's dress and everything. And so we went to Tougaloo, which was a very scary kind of thing. We'd never been there. We'd never been on a black campus. And we went to the home of Ed King, the Methodist minister who was the chaplain there. He had been beaten up that day and had a big patch on his face. And in the back room of his house, he just showed us where to go. There were students, black and white. Some of the students had come down from Oberlin for our Freedom Summer, planning Freedom Summer. Black activists were there. We were the only people from our college. There were some students from Millsaps College, which was a Methodist college in Jackson, which was known as much more liberal and active. And so we met several times and planned a concert, and Joan Baez came in the spring of '64 and sang at Tougaloo. And it was a truly wonderful moment. We had students from black and white colleges all over. And there again, you know, how much of that can I attribute to television? How much of it, you know, was watching what's going on the news by that time, seeing the freedom rides, seeing the arguments, seeing the horrible stuff in Alabama. Combination of news, fiction, what I think of as progressive fiction, but deeply embedded in things like westerns and the lawyer shows, all sorts of things like that. To me, it's why I call it, you know, it is the cultural center and it certainly was for a great many years, the social and cultural center of the country. And people saw the same things and had to react to and understand the same things. And there's a richness there that I decided later, for other reasons, I wanted to study.